forest. Hope all has been well. It's been some time since we've been together, so I finally have a connection to the internet, which has been a pretty challenging thing, especially traveling out of a forage mobile and living in the woods. So at the apothecary, and I thought I'd just tune in and see how everybody's doing out there. Got stuff everywhere. Got drying mushrooms and black cherries and ferments, and stocking up again at the old apothecary, and gonna head on soon to the Pine Barrens to pick as many blueberries as I possibly can and teach a class there this weekend. So I've just been touring around and teaching classes on the weekends and staying in the woods and fishing and foraging as much as I possibly can. So hope everybody's well out there. I felt like we open the portal to any discussions that anybody wants to have. What are you foraging? What are you looking for out there? What are you scoring? How's the mushroom forage where you're at? One of my favorite mushrooms, Lactarius. This is probably Corugus. Lightish gills, bruises, milks, orange stem. I found so many of them the other day. I actually found a new park that I'd never gone to, and totally a dirt road. And what I've been doing is just looking on the GPS for dirt roads and seeing what that good old Ram ProMaster van can handle. So I'll travel up there and I'll just check it out there and find myself a lake or a stream. Lately it's been for chanterelles. I've been looking for streams, and so following the streams and just looking down the banks of the stream. That's where you can find lots of chanterelles. And then just found the mother lode of Lactarius. So they can get pretty huge. What I did was I actually sliced them, and since I have so many, maybe I can show you here. This is like nothing. The whole basket was full. You probably saw my pictures on Instagram or whatever. So I came here and sliced them up, quick chopped them, and then I put them in the food dehydrator. I'll show you in a minute. So this one, of course, makes milk. I bruised the gills. So there are 3 or 4 edible Lactarius: Corugus, Volimus, and Hygrophorides. All are really good edibles in the Lactarius genus. So that's the genus of the mushrooms, and they're really good eating. I've been eating them so much that I pretty much am sick of them. So I'm starting to put them away, store them for the winter, and be making soups and everything out of them all year. So Onag or Onaga says, do I know any uses for Queen Anne's lace, wild carrot? Just curious, there's so much around. Also, do you know any properties of lovage off the top of my head? So Queen Anne's lace is, first level of Queen Anne's lace is, people make the carrot top fritters. So you can dip the Queen Anne's lace head in any sort of batter, and then you can fry it in oil, and that makes a really yummy treat. And then, of course, before that time, when the roots are around and it's just the basal rosette, which can be a dangerous time because it can look like poison hemlock or wire hemlock, but you pull those tiny roots out, and those are actually a feral carrot. So you can totally eat those carrots in the spring. Fall to spring is the time when the energy is in the earth, right? So you can totally eat the Queen Anne's lace roots, and those are wild carrot, Daucus carota, and Queen Anne has hairy legs, and that's how you can determine it. But right, once there's a stalk, it's kind of the root is finished. It's going to be spindly and hard. So you need to kind of watch it for an entire cycle and watch Queen Anne's lace growing. Make sure you can identify it top to bottom, and take a couple of years to watch those cycles. And then once you've successfully identified it or know where a patch is, you can then go there the next spring and harvest yourself some roots if that's what you're looking for. But the flowers, of course, are edible as a fritter. And then the seeds bring us into somewhat of a controversy, which is that Queen Anne's lace seeds are known as a contraceptive, and this gets thrown around very loosely, because when there are claims that Queen Anne's lace was used as a contraceptive, it's often not specified whether the woman was, number 1, actually fertile, and number 2, if the man actually ejaculated inside the woman's vagina. Anything will work. You could take tree bark and you can consume tea. And if you are not fertile, and if the man doesn't ejaculate fully inside the vagina, no baby occurs. So when we talk about Queen Anne's lace as a contraceptive, we should get to the point where that's a number one refining characteristic of that study. So there have been some studies, informal studies, about Queen Anne's lace as a contraceptive, and I would just encourage all the women out there, if you say that Queen Anne's lace is a contraceptive, please make sure that you're counting your cycle and you know your fertile time, and also that the man is fully ejaculating in you during your fertility, because that's the only way birth occurs, and so therefore that's the only way to see the effectivity of a contraceptive such as Queen Anne's lace. So for men, the seeds of Queen Anne's lace are less hormone shifting, and as a result can be sauteed, right? I've heard of people kind of flavoring their food with Queen Anne's lace seeds. So great plant. Remember, Queen Anne has hairy legs, or you can remember in the center of the flower, the umbel, right? You can see actually a nice pink or red dot, and that's the idea that Queen Anne pricked her finger and one drop of blood went into the center. See here, Frank mentions, can you eat huckleberry raw? And by huckleberry, you probably mean vaccinium, right? There's a few blueberry plants out there, and of course you can. I eat raw blueberries all the time, so as long as you're talking about the same huckleberry or blueberry that I am, then of course we eat them raw, lots and lots. Michael Gray mentions about boletes. Actually, the boletes are a general topic for several genus of mushrooms, all containing pores except for one, the gilled bolete, but they all have pores, not gills. And they often stain, and they have different stipes or stems. Some of them have indentations on the stems, some of them have kind of striations on the stem, protruding striations, and some of them are smooth. Some of them are in the Boletus genus Boletus, some of them are in the genus Tylopolis, some of them are in the genus Suillus, and it goes beyond from there. So there are many edibles within that. I don't eat a lot of Boletus, right? So my baseline rule for boletes, if it's brown capped and light or white colored gills, and it doesn't taste bitter, I'll eat it. Otherwise, I would eat several Suillus, like the slippery jack. People even eat the painted Suillus. That's a little controversial. Some like it, some don't. The chicken fat mushroom is another Suillus. There's even controversy about some of the scaber stalk bolete. That one goes back and forth whether or not it's edible. So the boletes, of course, they say that boletes are safe because none of them are deadly poisonous, but I once thought I had identified a bicolor bolete, which means basically there's another rule, right? So when it is a reddish cap and yellow pores, and the stem has yellow and red on it, there used to be known as two species. Now there seems to be hundreds and hundreds of them because of DNA analysis. And so there used to be a rule like, well, the yellow and the red on the stem, depending on which order it's in, that makes it edible or not. There's some confusion and controversy about this in the mushroom world. There is Boletus pseudosensibilis and there's Boletus sensibilis. I don't remember which one is edible. I don't really mess with any of the blue staining boletes, and some people do and they like them, but I try to just eat a couple of those Suillus are pretty much where I go with that. Let's see what else we got here. Feel free, anybody, to ask questions. You know, the other thing that Michael is mentioning is, you know, he's seeing lots of boletes, but he hasn't eaten any yet. He doesn't trust himself enough. That is actually trust. I would call fear of eating mushrooms is actually respect. That's actually what you need to stay alive. And I've taught myself how to eat mushrooms out of the woods since I was about 18 or 19. I had one bout of diarrhea one time from one of those blue staining boletes, actually. Other than that, I've been very safe. I haven't had any issue. And you just have to be slow, systematic, careful, and respectful. And of course, don't eat anything that you can't properly identify. So identifying mushrooms is not about eating mushrooms. So you have to do 1 or 2 or 3 years of just intense study, walking in the woods, looking at what's around, observing, trying to identify them with a field guide, do your dirt time, do your research, and let the eating them process be a slow and gradual time. Don't think you're going to go out into the woods and find yourself some food, especially if you look at mushrooms for the first time. It doesn't work that way. It's more about looking for a spouse. You're not going to get married to the first person you find on a trail. So don't eat the first mushroom you find, even if you think it looks edible. You'll often hear a lot of myths about mushrooms. I try to avoid all hard and fast rules. There are always exceptions. As they say, there are old mushroom hunters and there are bold mushroom hunters, but there are no old and bold mushroom hunters. So let's see. The one you sent me, Frank, so many people are sending me mushroom pictures and plant pictures that I can't possibly keep up. I always recommend, if you want to know a mushroom or a plant and you think of me, thank you for thinking of me, but put it on one of the public groups and then you can tag me and then we can talk as a community. It's more important to learn the process of identification than actually get the Latin name of a plant or a mushroom. So very important to know that you have to do your own observation homework. So if I divert you from giving you a clear answer, there's a reason. It's because I'm a teacher, and if I just gave you the answers all the time, you wouldn't learn how to learn on your own. And so, of course, for me, the most empowering thing about this process, seeking wild food and medicine, is finding my own trust, finding my own capacity within my own self that no one can give me. And people can point the way and people can show me a field guide, but it's up to me to do the study and the observation, to learn to observe, to be awake, right? Only you can wake yourself up. People can give you tools. Let's see. So Meredith mentions creative and delicious applications for borage leaves and blooms. So I don't know anything about eating borage, but I do know about the flowers, and you can eat the flowers or make an infused oil with those flowers. And borage, of course, contains omega fatty 3 acids. So that's really all I know. Does anyone know if you can eat borage leaves? I've never heard of that. Hello, Maria. Welcome. Hi, Deb. Hello, Michael. Michael asks, elderberries are starting to come out here as well. I was having trouble separating the berries from the super tiny stems. Yeah. Is it safe if some of the small stems are mixed in with the berries? Unfortunately, let's see if I can get it on my computer. The questions often get cut off. It's so annoying. On my phone at least. Oh, it was just present and then it just disappeared. That's really obnoxious. Let's see if I can get this to make sense here. So I'm just going to assume what you're asking, which is that if you try to separate the berries from the stems, you're going to get stem pieces, and elderberry has a lot of poisonous aspects to it. So what you want to do is you want to avoid as much of the stem as possible. But interestingly enough, I have here cherries, right? Prunus, let's see, Prunus genus, black cherry, Prunus serotina, maybe. So these actually, the cherry has cyanide within it, and the stems have cyanide within them, and the green berries have cyanide within them. So what I find is that there's a certain way of grasping it. So when I'm harvesting elderberries, or when I'm harvesting cherries, I actually first start out with the ability to mediate how hard I pull. And so a lot of people will harvest in a way that gets a lot of unripe fruit. And that's pretty unnecessary. You don't need to do that. So when you're working the elderberry, that umbel, try to roll the berries off instead of grabbing at it. Mulberry is one of the best examples. If mulberries aren't ripe, they don't come off in your finger, and you can pull them off, but then you have a whole bunch of unripe fruit. So I'm of the school of, if you jostle elderberries and you get 7 elderberries, then you don't have enough elderberry trees there. Then the harvest wasn't proper. The observation wasn't clear enough to realize that you don't have enough elderberry to actually make a substantial harvest. So I think, so I eat a little bit of cherry stem. When I'm eating cherries, I will eat a few of the more red ones. They're not all black. There are some phytoconstituents in there that could be harmful with a large dose, but actually probably are quite immune stimulating in microdoses. So I wouldn't be super worried about small amounts of elderberry stem getting into my berries, but consider that it's all in how you grab it, and every plant has their finesse. Every single berry has their finesse. So the black cherries, the other day I was harvesting them, I'll grab the umbel, the cluster, with one hand, and I'll just kind of like jostle the black ones off. And mostly if I do it with the right touch, with the right pressure, I won't get a lot of green or unripe berries. So the same is true with elderberry. That said, I have harvested the elderberry flowers and made tea from the elderberry flower with the stem. So, good question. Charo says, absolutely, research is the key. Unfortunately, some believe that knowledge is going to come overnight. Yeah, well, that's, I think one of the great things I love about foraging is you kind of can't BS yourself. Nature will kill you. That's why I feel like I practice the yoga of foraging, because if I taught yoga, I could easily say, oh yeah, so I've had samadhi and I'm enlightened and all this great stuff, and no one can really refute if it's true or not. Well, if you, one example of this is often at a plant walk people will say, oh, well, I'm not allergic to poison ivy, in front of a whole group of people, which I find is kind of a dangerous comment. So what I always say is we make a little science experiment, and I suggest, well, if you're not allergic to poison ivy, would you please rub it upon your face in front of all of us? And absolutely 0 people have been willing to do that so far. So what I mean by that is that we should be an open-minded skeptic, in the sense of when we look to nature for food and medicine, we should understand that we have a limit of our knowledge, we have a limit of our education, we have a limit of our perception, and the goal is to honor our limit. And that is really actually the practice of yoga. The practice of yoga is not to be able to bend like a pretzel and impress your friends. The practice of yoga is to understand where your bodily limits are and to push just that much past it, and to be able to breathe fully within that realm, not to go to the extreme, because then you snap your neck and you get some problems. So with foraging, it's like that as well. With herbalism, it's like that. You can practice from what you know. You can get a long way on what you know, and you don't have to make up what you don't know. And if you go in the woods and you try to eat a mushroom that you're not familiar with, it's going to teach you a lesson. And that lesson might be diarrhea, that lesson might be a trip to the hospital, or that lesson might be what I like to call permanent astral projection, otherwise known as death. So we really need to know our limits, and we need to understand that this is a time-extended process. Herbalism, there's always something more to learn. Foraging, there's always something more to learn. That's the joy of it. That's the blessing of it. Every time I go out, I see something new, I learn something new. So the goal is to be able to ask yourself the right questions to continue to expand your perception and your awareness, not to walk around as if you have complete knowledge, right? Because then you can't open your senses to something new. The great example of that is like they give the bird, right? So you're like, oh, I've seen robins, right? A robin, a bird, right? I've seen one, right? You've all seen a robin. Well, what color are its toenails? And you probably have never looked at the robin's toenails. So, what color is its beak? Do you know? What about its feet? What is the color of the robin's underbelly? Is there a difference? What is the color of the feathers under the wings of a robin? So see how you've seen a robin, but you may have not observed all those characteristics. And as you learn to ask yourself more stimulating questions, like I'm asking you, if you do this with mushrooms and plants or animals, you will always find something new to learn. And that's what's really important, is to follow that. Like Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. That's my bliss, and that's the bliss of going out and seeking food and medicine, is not the bounty that you bring home every once in a while. It's the opening your senses to observe. And that is the practice that leads you to the food and medicine. right? It's like we must be open. You're probably familiar with the story of the Zen master and the student. So this is how I think we should approach nature, right? The Zen master sits with a student. The student says, I would like to learn from you. The Zen master says, okay, let me make you some tea. And the Zen master makes the tea, and he comes back, and the student is going on and on about their achievements and how much they've meditated and how much they are prepared for their teachings and what they've done and what their accomplishment is. And the Zen master starts pouring the tea, and the student goes on and continues to talk and tell the Zen master of their accomplishments, and the Zen master starts pouring tea all over the table. It overfills, it pours all over the guy's lap, and he says, what are you doing? And of course the lesson is that the Zen master says, in order to learn, you have to empty your cup. You can't be full. If your cup is full, there's no room. And so when I go into nature, I try to remember that. I've never seen the same mushroom twice. You've never seen the same bird twice, because your eyes are different, your mind is different, right? The cells in your body are different. You're fueled by different food, right? And that animal is also in the same place. And the DNA changes. And so if we can stay receptive and open, then we're doing the time necessary to actually learn how to eat from the wild. Janice mentions a wide-toothed comb can get the elderberries off. That's the funny thing. So with a blueberry rake, you could use a blueberry rake, and you might end up having more debris to sift through later than if you use your hands, because your hands are actually, do you know what these are made for? These are made for picking berries, right? The Homo sapien developed fingers with sense and nerves so that they can adjust their pull on different berries. So use a comb, use a blueberry rake, but you're just going to have more debris potentially to sift through later, or green berries, right? So then you'll have to pick through. You could either harvest a whole bunch out in nature and then come home and have hours and hours of picking through green berries, or you can go into nature and kind of jostle it, and you don't get every ripe berry, and you drop some on the ground, and those end up being planting, and then you leave some there for the other animals. So that's kind of my approach, is to take some, right? I don't have the obsessive compulsive need to take every ripe berry. That would be a way to extinguish the food source, right? You need to help it proliferate, otherwise it goes away. Deb, hello Deb. She asks, can you tincture passion flower? Of course, there are two kind of passion flower, which we should be mindful of. There's passiflora, which is not in the passion flower family. I'll actually look that up. Passiflora, see, this is the weird thing. The passion vine. Oh no, this is the same. Let's find it. I'll come up with that other one later. There's I know Stephen Buhner talks about this other species that isn't in the... Oh, pasque-flower, that's the one. Let's see. So pasque-flower sounds like that. Pulsatilla, yeah. There we go. That's on Stephen Buhner's actually book, Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm. So we don't want to talk about that one. We want to talk about passion flower, otherwise known as passiflora. The common one is Passiflora incarnata. That's the one that has this beautiful flower. Of course, that flower in itself is a good tea, and you can also tincture that. And the berries, the maypop as they're called, are ripe once the whole plant is dried out and dead, and that berry gets very soft. And there are, when I was in Colombia, there's like 30 or 40 different kinds of passion flower vine that have edible fruits, and they're amazing, and they have these crunchy seeds but very sour flavor. With the passion flower, you can definitely tincture the passion flowers. The issue with passion flower, of course, and the same issue with St. John's wort, is they're antidepressant, but they work completely different than antidepressants, so we always want to be, it's always contraindicated if you're on antidepressants, pharmaceutical antidepressants, to work with St. John's wort or passiflora, especially with passiflora because it's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, otherwise known as MAOI. So that actually stops your ability to break down certain chemicals. So if you combine certain pharmaceuticals, especially selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, otherwise known as SSRIs, if you combine an SSRI with an MAOI, you might be high as hell for a month, right? So you need to be very careful about this combination, and this is why I, as an herbalist, if I was working with somebody who had depression, I would definitely try to wean them from their pharmaceutical antidepressant and get them clean before I would try something of the herbal realm. They also act totally differently. Of course, I would say something like the pharmaceutical antidepressant is going to numb you to the source of your depression, and the herbal antidepressant is going to help you face that part of yourself that you don't want to look at. So a big difference there. So of course, with tincturing, I'm trying to get some more light there. With tincturing, you always want to get to the point where there's either shove the herbs in a jar and pour the alcohol over and just make sure it's saturated, or you can measure, and of course we usually use 1-to-2 ratio or 1-to-4 ratio, 1-to-2 ratio for fresh herb and 1-to-4 ratio for dried herb. So you can check that out more on my YouTube channel, Return to Nature Skills. NOFA, New Jersey, last year I taught at their winter conference. I did a tincturing class that I webcasted, and that's available on my YouTube channel. Also, Rich Ochek has a great book called Making Plant Medicine, and James Green has another great book called The Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook. So those are good resources for tincture making. Usually, if you're dealing with things that are generally helpful, like stinging nettle, you really can't screw up a tincture of stinging nettle. If you're talking about ghost pipe, you need to be a little more careful. So it depends on the herb. Oh wow, Deb, that's really awesome. If you have a ton, you can always feel free to harvest them, and I'll help you make a tincture. We can make a tincture together, and I'll love to share some with you. I don't have a good source of passion flower flowers, but they're great. And also you can try them in tea. Of course, just that contraindication as an MAOI. When can you make the tea? When the flower is out and ripe. So you could just harvest that entire flower, either dry it or break it up. Of course, if you wanted to, you can dry all the flowers or a part of the flowers, because again, like I was talking about with berry harvesting, right? If you take the green berry and you take it home and then you discard it, that's one less berry that could have gone to seed and ripen and gone out in the wild to make another elderberry tree, right? Every single elderberry makes an entire new tree. So with the passion flower, of course, we want to just consider it is great for pollinators, for example, so we want to harvest it and dry them as you go, and then you can have, hopefully several. So take, 70 to 80% of what you find. Awesome. Let me know if anybody else has any questions. Feel free to ask. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well out there. Foraging friend. Yeah, so I'm leaving the apothecary tomorrow. If anybody hasn't seen, I made a gallon of turkey tail tincture. So I am working on a 5 mushroom blend. I have Trametes versicolor, or turkey tail. I have maitake. I have reishi. And so if anybody's interested in a blend, I have tons of tinctures. I actually made a list today. I cataloged everything. I mean, we have motherwort to osha to olive leaf to turkey tail. So many tinctures. I have a lot of infused oils. We have chocolates. I have herbally infused honeys. If anybody's interested and would like to support this work, please feel free to always buy stuff from us and undercut the large-scale corporation who's trying to feed you pseudo herbal goods, right? So just check out my website at returntonature.us, where I have some things on the apothecary, but I don't have everything there. So definitely, if you're interested in supporting, send an email, or check out gofundme.com/returntonature to check out the Forage Mobile plan. I'm getting ready to renovate it, and when I do, I'm definitely going to have a more detailed account. I haven't been able to really do anything because basically getting that vehicle stretched me past my financial capacity, and it's been a difficult thing of staying on Wi-Fi. So I want to be live webcasting a lot, but I have to stay on Wi-Fi or else my limited data plan goes over and then it's more expensive. So please help support the ability to stay online and to webcast to everybody in any way possible. My PayPal is paypal.me/return-to-nature. Your donations help this work thrive and help me to access you. Otherwise, it's very hard in the middle of the woods when AT&T is sending you messages about how you're going to go over, and of course it's on my family plan, and then my family gets all like, hey, who's going to pay for that? And so a difficult balance there. So Michael Gray mentions he has a lot of St. Andrew's Cross, another Hypericum like St. John's wort, blooming right now. What would I do with it? So there are many other Hypericum, and we usually work with Hypericum perforatum, which has perforations in the leaf. If you take the leaf, hold it up to the light, you can see tiny holes. That's the one that is applied for topical and internal work. Now there are several other Hypericum. Some of them have other similar known medicinal effects, some of them don't. The question is, when can you safely assume that the genus of a plant are interchangeable? And the problem is there's not always an easy way to tell, but for example, if you have the buds of St. Andrew's Cross and you rub them and you see this purple-red color, that would tell you that there's similar chemical constituents. Is it identical? No, but there's like 20,000 chemicals, and it may have more of this one but less of that one, and that may actually be beneficial in its own way. So I'm a big fan of trying to stretch that envelope in a way that's safe and conscious. Now if you're talking about making a topical oil, that's obviously much safer than trying to replace Prozac. So start off small, start off gradual, see how it is, observe it, try to research it, go on Google Scholar, try to look on Wikipedia, do your homework, do your research on the Hypericum genus or St. Andrew's Cross, see what you can find. Feel free to share it on my page if you find anything, and you can definitely make a topical oil out of it. So you just harvest the flowers and put them in olive oil or jojoba, or that would be good, right when they're fresh, and you'll get this red, beautiful oil, which then you can apply topically to your skin. Now, a small portion of people get skin allergies, skin reactions to St. John's wort topically, so obviously test it out, make sure you're not one of those people. So Caroline says, how about ghost pipe tincture? Is there any special way to tincture it? I would just recommend, what people do is they recommend fresh, 1 to 2. So approximately 50% alcohol. So one of the things I'll say about ghost pipe harvesting is when you have all the ghost pipe fronds, if you would call them, and you look around first and you see there's 20 groupings of plants, take like 2 or 3 from each one. Take 10% from each individuated plant. This way it can reproduce itself. You don't have to take the entire one plant. In some cases and sometimes you'll want the roots and you'll want to do that, but you would always observe populations first. So if you pick from that, what you can do is just weigh 1 to 2 parts alcohol, right? That's what it's saying. So 1 part weight of herb to 2 parts volume if it's a fresh tincture. So I use ounces, so you can weigh the ounces and then measure the ounces, right? That's called weight to volume conversion. That throws a lot of people off, but it's actually very simple. So you weigh the plant and then you double or quadruple, depending on if it's fresh or dry, the amount. So I also have ghost pipe available if anybody's interested. Ghost pipe is basically an analgesic, which is a pain, I don't want to say killer, but a pain reducer. And I would say it's more like a dissociative anesthetic, which is why it has some sort of myth of being somewhat psychedelic or consciousness altering, because if you take enough of it, you will definitely feel sort of pushed out of your body. And of course, that's what you want if you have a bullet hole in the side of your leg, right? But pain is a message, and we in the Western world, in the modern world, need to learn that pain is to be mediated and worked through, not turned off. And the chance of re-injury from pharmaceutical-based painkillers is very high because it turns off your ability to feel that you're not supposed to be walking on your broken ankle. So re-injury is high if you completely tune yourself out of being able to feel all of the pain. Most herbs that are painkillers are actually pain reducing, and that's important because we need that pain, we need that inflammation in order to heal on emotional, mental, physical level. So ghost pipe is very helpful in cases of severe pain or chronic pain. Something like MS or fibromyalgia can definitely help in those cases. My uncle had Crohn's and he was working with ghost pipe, so those can all help. Deb mentions the tick god slapped me in the back again. Of course, I'm walking with about 4 or 5 deer tick bites from the last month. I'm of course treating all the time, topically, with a salve with essential oils or a tincture, right? I have OSHA, so I'll put OSHA tincture on it and then I'll slap a salve on it as much as I can think of it for at least 7 to 12 days, and then I will continue to internally dose. I basically take preventative Lyme formula all the time because I can't be out in the woods in New Jersey or the Northeast really without encountering deer ticks. That said, it was pretty heavy for a while, but actually the last month has been quite mild with minute babies. So be careful about ticks. Always prevent, right? An easy way of saying prevention, take from Stephen Buhner, 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams for a 150-pound person of astragalus powder. You can just buy a pound of astragalus powder and put a teaspoon in there. It's about 1,000 milligrams, and you can just down that in 1 shot of water, and that's your daily dose of, apparently, I actually heard this on Daniel Vitalis' podcast. I haven't affirmed this with Stephen Buhner, but apparently the idea is, one of the ideas for prevention is that it makes actually the surface of your skin harder to bite, which I'm a little skeptical about, so I need to learn more about that. The other thing is it boosts your immune system in a certain way that gives you the ability to respond better to a Lyme onset or a Lyme and co-infection onset, and then of course you need to hit harder from that. So to formulate around Lyme, what I think is half antispirochetal, 1, what would you call that? So that's half, and then you have other 3. How do you divide half in 3? I'm not very smart with math. 15%, 15, 30, 45. That's close enough. 15.5%. So half antispirochetal, and then liver, lymph, anti-inflammatory. So those are the herbal actions I try to address when I'm dealing with Lyme. Of course, I do custom formulations for Lyme. I have plenty of Lyme herbs, so get in touch with me if you need. I also do herbal consultations if anybody's interested. So Onag says, can I talk about dreaming plants like wormwood, mugwort, and others? Not to pinpoint the plants, but one that can assist in vivid dreams, remembering lucidity, etc. Ghost pipe does have a affinity for lucid dreaming as well. I've not heard of wormwood being a dreaming plant, but that makes sense. Mugwort, definitely I work with a lot. Mugwort is a dreaming plant. Who else comes to mind? I mean, passion flower can help. In a way, any herb which you embody with the intent to dream can be your dreaming guide. Same is true for a stone. So if you have a favorite crystal and you embody that with the intent to dream, that will help you because your body naturally can dream. It's not a matter of chemistry. It's a matter of intent. So at night, if you have the intent to dream and you drink mugwort tea, or you take mugwort tincture, or you smoke mugwort, or you smudge with mugwort, you will increase, that will be another level of embodying, invoking the dream time. And dreaming is very important. If we don't dream, we can't process the subconscious. So we need dreaming. A world which does not dream is a dead world. So we all need to tap into the Gaian messages. We need to understand what dreaming's place is in our modern society, and we need to not allow the modernization of our culture to destroy the necessity of dreaming because we haven't figured it out, its functions, so black and white. So continue to work with your dreams, work with plants and your dreams, continue to journal your dreams, contemplate the message. One of the tips I like for dreaming is that if you try to find a theme throughout your dream, like take everyone as, I like 3 versions of interpreting a dream. So the first one is like, it's all like a metaphor. Somehow I'll use the offensive version of, I feel like shit, right? People say I feel like shit. So that's obviously metaphoric. You don't feel like a piece of shit, an actual physical pile of shit, but you feel bad, and that's a creative way of saying I feel bad. So in the dream world, you get that as well, except it's on hyperdrive. So your dream kind of says, I feel like shit, except it says, I feel like a tumbling thing that falls out of an airplane that falls into water and jumps and then overcomes a crocodile and then starts to fly and feels great. That's what I feel like my life is like right now. And so if you kind of try to see that one of the ways your dreaming is talking to you is like a very grandiose metaphor. The other one is to say these characters are me. It's all parts of myself. And the other one is to say, no, that's prophecy, that's me intuiting, that's me psychically rubbing against that other person, and I'm learning something about them. I think all 3 of those are true at the same time. That's the multidimensionality of the dream time. So it's very important to contemplate our dreams, try to understand our dreams, try to make time for them. I find that when I get into a dreaming desire and take about 2 to 3 droppers full of mugwort tincture that I make, that really helps with dreaming, especially if I don't jump up right away or use an alarm clock. That's like the most horrible. I feel for anybody who has to use an alarm clock to wake up. But if you naturally wake up and you don't just get out of bed really quickly, but if you lay there and you think, what was the last thing that was happening, and you catch that, and then you work backwards. That's kind of my method. If I can remember, I wake up with a song or something, and I'll wake up and it'll be there, and I'll kind of, I could go, forget that, let's move on into conscious life. Or I can look at, wait, why am I thinking this? Oh yeah, that's because it was in my dream. And then if I can remember that and track back, I can usually get all the way into the dream and then play it forward. So that's what I'll do. And then if anything feels significant, I'll write it down. So I have my dreams since I was about 17 or 18. Onaga says, I have wormwood bush, but I've not yet made anything with it except put a sprig underneath my pillow. A great work to put a sprig under your pillow. Wormwood is, of course, the precursor to absinthe, which is why people have such a fear around it. Wormwood also has thujone, which is a essential oil, which when ingested in high amounts can cause liver failure. Same is true if you inject hydrogen into your body, and water is actually H2O. So when you isolate an ingredient in a plant, you're always going to cause negative side effects. And of course, no one in their right mind, unless they cut their tongue out, would be able to drink enough wormwood tea to get to that level of dosage that thujone caused harm in one study that was paid for by, who do you think, the pharmaceutical industry, to probably prove the rationale for fearing backyard herbalism so that you rush to the doctor. So thujone is also in cedar trees, which is sacred to indigenous people all over the world. So we want to be mindful of consuming essential oils. Essential oils are not candy. They're not really recommended to consume, but a plant has cellulose, fiber, tissues, fats, alkaloids, etc. in a matrix, in a chemical matrix with that essential oil, so you're getting a minute dose, plus you're getting the building blocks to help you digest it and break it down. So when you consume the essential oil, you're not consuming a tea of the plant. Those are not the same thing. Oregano oil is not oregano tea. If you make really strong oregano tea and you try to drink it, your body is going to tell you that it's too much. If you isolate oregano, the chemistry, your body can no longer tell you that it's too much. So wormwood is a very intense herb. It's very helpful for parasites, of course. Because of that intensity, it's so bitter. But you can add it in small amounts to things. That's why I prefer, if they're really bitter, I prefer tincture. So if you take a tincture, it's kind of concentrated, and then you can knock it back quite quickly. So wormwood is a great herb, and there is a way to make absinthe from wormwood, but often it's not seen as the true way, and nobody really knows what the true way is. There's a lot of absinthe on the market these days, and it's not always the old school legit stuff. Deb asked when I'll be in Jersey. I'm actually in Jersey right now. I'm at Lawrence at the Apothecary and doing some work here, and then I'm headed down to the Pine Barrens tomorrow, and I'll be scarfing blueberries and teaching a class this weekend, and then probably come back up to somewhere, this area, and then I'm going to head in August. I'm going to head to New York, hopefully do something at Ananda Ashram, again, in Monroe, New York. Actually, before that, hopefully I'm teaching a class with some really great people. What is their? Get Juiced. They make fermented nuts and these really great cookies. They make all this kind of raw, snacky things. And they're doing a grand opening on August 12th. Hopefully I will be teaching there, and then maybe Sparta Mountain on the 13th of August, this is. And then head to Ananda Ashram, teach at Harriman State Park on the 20th, and then a place called the Hudson Woods in Kerhonkson, New York, and teach another class in the weekend, that Sunday in the area, and then head to, actually my family has some land, so I'm going to try to visit that, and maybe my herb school, my herb teachers from back in 2010, Heartstone Herb School around Ithaca, Van Etten, New York, and then head south, go to the Poconos, and teach in Bethlehem and Allentown area. So that'll be the tour from August to early September, and then hopefully I'll teach at the Bucks Healthy Living Fest in Bucks County, Pennsylvania on the 10th. So that will be the next couple months. Really appreciate you all tuning in, and it's great to connect. It's been a while. So Barb asks, a couple more questions here. What is good for allergies? You have them all 4 seasons. So first level is getting allergens out of the diet, right? So it's common sense that sugar, which reduces your immune system, or flour, which reduces your immune system, is going to tax your body from being able to deal with pollen. So first you want to have a clean diet. You want to have an anti-inflammatory diet. You can look into that, of course. I would say no whites, no white sugar, white flour. Always soak and sprout all your beans and grains. That makes a huge difference. Eat fermented food, kimchi, sauerkraut. If you don't know how to make it, look on my YouTube channel, watch the videos, check it out. I have lots of articles on my website as well. Then you're dealing with, okay, eat local raw honey as much as you can, especially then look at what you're allergic to, and try to actually homeopathically or microdose yourself with that allergen by consuming it in a very light tea, and build your immune system up to it so that you're not inhaling it through your sinuses. Basic protocol, right? Anti-inflammatory, right? Turmeric, take about a teaspoon of turmeric, then nettle tea every day, about 32 ounces with a squirt of lemon inside of it, and raw local honey, and then you can look from there. So then quercetin, which is sold as a supplement, is in oak bark, or any astringent I think will help tonify your sinus tissue, kind of tighten it so that the dripping, the precipitating of your sinus fluids isn't coming out. Now that's a symptomatic blockage. That's not going to help you, but that's going to reduce the symptoms. So you need all of that spectrum in order to get to a point where you're not reacting to the allergies, and then build the body in the slow path, right, for the next 5 years. Look at lymphatic tonification, clean your lymph system out once you're not putting in the foods that are toxic anymore. Clean your lymph system out, and then of course look at immunomodulators, right, something like reishi for 6 months, right, and that's very hard to do unless you make a tincture or you purchase a tincture. Immunomodulating medicinal mushrooms are very helpful for restoring the balance of the body from having allergies, right? Basically, allergies is like you've been getting your butt kicked since you were born. Many of us weren't breastfed. Many of us are C-section babies. We get vaccinations. We were given antibiotics every time we had a tickle in our throats. We are inundated with toxic chemicals everywhere we go. The effect of that is autoimmunity, and allergies are one such form of autoimmune disorder, right? So we have to kind of restore ourselves from all that. Look to your gut bacteria. Gut bacteria are essential to not getting allergic reactions, turns out. Ryan asks, what's up, brother? What are my plans for August 21st, the eclipse? I just mentioned that I was going to go on that whole tour. Maybe you heard it. I thought the solar eclipse was the 18th, I guess where you are. So I will be probably in upstate New York. I wonder if it's visible from there. I haven't looked into it yet. But I'll probably just be in the woods enjoying life, picking blueberries or something. Otherwise, I could look at something radical, like I know a lot of people are going to North Carolina, Asheville area. I don't think I'll be doing that yet. Hopefully I'll be doing that like in a big jaunt some other time. So I hadn't really thought about it, but thanks for reminding me of it, and maybe I'll be teaching at Ananda Ashram that weekend, hopefully. Frank, thank you. Really grateful for your gratitude. Deb, awesome, yeah. Let me try to remember where you live in relation to Lauren's. I'll send you a text message. I'd love to stop by and maybe collect some. What's up, Drew? Many blessings. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. Hope all's well out there in Colorado. Hopefully I'll get out there soon. Love Colorado. I was out there last year in the winter. Barb mentions, I do eat clean. Yes, have had them from day one. Tired of it. Thank you so much for the info. Yeah, try to rebuild the probiotics in your gut. I think that's really important. The more they find about the gut bacteria, and of course we have systematically targeted them through antibacterial substances in the waterway. I mean, fluoride and chloride are designed basically to kill bacteria. Your body needs bacteria, so think about that. Right, we're bathing in antibacterial substances. Every pharmaceutical that's ever been consumed by a human is being urinated into the city waterway. It cannot filter that. Check out the Lost Language of Plants, Stephen Buhner's book, to just understand how those chemicals don't go anywhere. Right, they cycle through the atmosphere. So we're literally bathing in birth control and pharmaceuticals of all sorts. So, consider, of course, that's going to have a detrimental effect towards a human being trying to have no allergies. But of course, eat pollen. You have to very scientifically and systematically think about how can I find what I'm allergic to and consume the smallest amount possible and go from there. So another thing I have is a resource on my website, returntonature.us, where I do have a blog, which you might want to check out, called Pine Pollen and Allergies. And that gives some of that kind of low-dose herbalism to work your way up to not being allergic. Also, nettle, as I mentioned, is an antihistamine of sorts. Right, it blocks the histamine response, if I remember correctly, just like an antihistamine would. So instead of taking Claritin, just drink lots of stinging nettle. So Matt, Kathleen, Drew, we actually did a Natural Breakdown reunion. I don't know if you'd heard of that. It was really fun, and we did that at the Medicine Wheel back in May. That video is actually on the Natural Breakdown Facebook page, so anybody can feel free to check that out. I do play music, but unfortunately I don't play music very much professionally because I basically was never able to find a bass player. So if you know any bass players in New Jersey, please put me in touch that are totally clean hippies and aren't like shwilly, druggy people in the jam band scene. I'd love to play with some more people. And much love to you. And thank you for helping who you help, and thank you for all the work that you've done to bring people together musically. Drew has booked many a Natural Breakdown gigs in many a places. So yeah, speaking of music, we'll just end things with a little ditty here. Many blessings. Thank you, friends, for joining in another edition of Foragers broadcast. Please be in touch anytime, and as I mentioned, please help support this work so it can continue to thrive. Some money is necessary, so if you have some and you'd like to share some, it just helps me get out there and to continue to do this. So many blessings, friends. Drew, I'll definitely hit you up when I come to Denver. Many blessings, friends.